There is a specific kind of silence that follows a lie. Not the peaceful kind, not the quiet that comes after a storm has passed. No, this silence is heavy. It presses against your chest like a hand that refuses to let go. It wraps around your throat and makes it hard to breathe. And if you've ever stood in the middle of a room full of people who are staring at you like you are something broken, something dangerous, something to be afraid of, then you already know exactly what I mean. My name is Nadia, and for the better part of 2 years, I was the most talked about woman in my department. Not because of my work, not because of my talent, not because of anything I had actually done, but because of a story someone else wrote about me. A story built from whispers and half-truths and the quiet, calculated cruelty of a woman who smiled at my face every single morning. Let me take you back. I was 31 years old when I joined Meridian Consulting Group. It was the kind of company people fought to get into. Polished offices, important clients, a reputation that opened doors. I had spent 6 years grinding through smaller firms, building my portfolio, earning every credential I could. So when I got the call from Meridian, I remember sitting in my car after the phone interview and pressing both hands flat against the steering wheel, just to feel something real. I made it. That's all I kept thinking. I actually made it. My first week, I was introduced to the team I would be joining, a mid-sized project division focused on client relations and strategic planning. There were 11 of us, and on that first morning, standing at the entrance to the open plan office with my bag on my shoulder and a coffee I was too nervous to drink, one woman walked straight toward me with a wide smile and an outstretched hand. Her name was Priya. She was everything I imagined a successful woman in that office looked like. Confident, well-dressed, the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately owned it. She welcomed me like she had been waiting for me, showed me to my desk, introduced me to everyone by name, even saved me a seat at the lunch table that first afternoon. I thought, this is the kind of colleague who makes a new place feel like home. I trusted her almost immediately, and I know now that was exactly what she wanted. Over the following months, Priya and I became close. We ate lunch together, we stayed late on projects, she came to me when she was stressed, and I came to her when I needed advice. I confided in her, things about my past, about a difficult relationship I had left behind, about my insecurities as someone who had always felt like she had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. She listened, she nodded, she said all the right things. But what I didn't know that day, what I couldn't have possibly imagined, was that every single word I ever spoke to her in confidence was being carefully filed away, not as a friend stores memories, but as a weapon stores ammunition. The first sign came quietly, the way all dangerous things do. It was a Tuesday morning. I had arrived early, as I always did, and as I settled at my desk, I noticed something shift in the room. The easy greetings I had grown used to were shorter that day. Eyes that normally met mine with warmth slid away just a little too quickly. Our team lead, Marcus, walked past my desk without stopping, which was unusual because he almost always paused to check in. I told myself I was imagining it. I made my coffee, I opened my files, I worked. But by the end of that week, I could no longer pretend. Something had changed. The air around me had changed, and I had no idea why. It took 12 days before someone finally told me the truth. Her name was Simone, a quiet, careful woman who sat 2 desks away from mine. She was not someone I had grown especially close to, but she was decent, honest in the way that people who have been hurt before tend to be. She caught me alone in the break room one Thursday evening, long after most people had left, and she closed the door behind her. "I don't know if I should be telling you this," she said, "but I think you need to know." She told me that a story had been circulating through the office, a story about me, that I was unstable, that I had a history of creating conflict in my previous workplaces, that I had been let go from my last firm, not because the contract ended, as I had told everyone, but because I had made false complaints against a colleague. That I was the kind of person, the story said, who smiled sweetly and then destroyed people quietly from the inside. I stood very still while Simone spoke. I remember the hum of the refrigerator behind me. I remember the fluorescent light above us that flickered slightly, the way it always did. I remember how my hands felt completely numb. "Who said this?" I asked, though somewhere deep underneath all that shock, I already knew. Simone hesitated. Then she said Priya's name. I wish I could tell you I was surprised, but the truth is, the moment I heard it confirmed, everything suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. The way Priya had always asked me questions that felt like concern, but were really excavation. The way she had memorized my vulnerabilities and repeated them back to me like comfort. The way she smiled just a little too smoothly whenever I mentioned a success. She was not my friend. She had never been my friend. She was threatened by me, and she had decided to dismantle me before I could ever truly rise. The weeks that followed were among the hardest of my life. I would arrive at work and feel the weight of every misled opinion pressing down on me. Colleagues who had been warm became polite in that distant, careful way that tells you the warmth is gone. Meetings I had previously been included in were suddenly full without me. When I spoke in a group setting, I could feel the hesitation in the air, people wondering whether to trust what I was saying, whether I was that kind of person. There is a particular humiliation in being misrepresented, in having your character stripped away from you and replaced with something ugly that carries your name. And the worst part, the part that truly broke something in me, was that I hadn't done anything wrong. My record was clean. My references were good. Every single claim Priya had made was fabricated from nothing but her own fear and ambition. But no one had checked. No one had asked me. They had simply believed her because she had planted the seed slowly enough that by the time the story was fully grown, it felt like something they had always known. I cried in my car more evenings than I can count. I questioned everything. I questioned whether I was truly as strong as I had always believed, whether I deserved this somehow, whether I should just resign quietly and start over somewhere new and pretend none of this had happened. And then, one night, sitting alone in my apartment with the city quiet outside my window, something inside me shifted. Not into rage, not into bitterness, into something far more powerful than either of those things. Into clarity. I was not going to leave. I was not going to shrink. I was not going to hand her the exit she had been engineering for me. Because the truth, the actual, documented, verifiable truth, was still on my side. And I had spent 6 years building a record that no rumor could erase. All I had to do was make sure the right people saw it. I started quietly, deliberately, the way she never expected me to. First, I requested a formal meeting with HR, not to complain, not to accuse, but to ask a simple question. I wanted to know whether there had been any formal concerns raised about my performance or conduct since joining the company. The answer, as I already knew it would be, was no. My record at Meridian was spotless. Then I contacted my previous employer directly. I asked them to send a formal letter of reference, one that outlined the exact circumstances of my departure, the work I had contributed, and the professional standing I had left with. It arrived within the week. It was glowing. I then compiled every performance review I had ever received, every commendation, every email in which a client or manager had praised my work. I arranged them in a clean, careful document, not aggressively, not dramatically, simply as a record. A quiet, irrefutable record. And then I requested a meeting with Marcus, my team lead, and the department director. I walked into that meeting the same way I had walked into the building on my very first day, with my bag on my shoulder and everything I had built inside me. I placed my documentation on the table. I did not raise my voice. I did not perform emotion. I simply said, I understand there have been concerns raised about my character and professional history. I'd like to address those concerns directly, with evidence. I watched Marcus's expression shift as he read. I watched the director go very still. And when they looked up at me, something had changed in their eyes. The fog of second-hand opinion had begun to lift. What I hadn't known at the time was that I was not the first person Priya had done this to. While my documents were being reviewed, another colleague, someone who had quietly left the company 18 months earlier, came forward of her own accord after hearing through a mutual connection that I had raised concerns. She had experienced the same manufactured whispers, the same slow erosion of her reputation, the same brilliant, practiced smile. Two voices, documented and consistent, carry a very different weight than one. HR launched a formal investigation. I was not required to fight or argue or beg. The evidence assembled itself. And Priya, the woman who had greeted me on my first morning with an outstretched hand and a story already forming in her mind, was placed on formal review, then quietly offered the kind of exit package that companies give when they need someone gone but want no further noise. She was gone within 6 weeks. I would be lying if I said I felt nothing when I heard. I did feel something, but it wasn't triumph, it wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was something quieter and more profound than either of those things. It was the feeling of having been seen clearly, finally, after so long of being seen through someone else's distorted lens. Call me into his office the week after. He said something I have never forgotten. We should have asked you first, before any of this went as far as it did. We should have come to you first. He was right, and they told him so. Not with bitterness, but with the kind of honesty that comes from having survived something that nearly broke you. I have thought many times about what I would say to Priya if I ever saw her again. In the early days, when the wound was still fresh, I imagined the things I might say, all the sharp, precise words that would finally make her understand what she had done. But I don't imagine that anymore, because here's what I know now, on the other side of all of it. People who feel the need to destroy others are people who have never truly believed in their own value. Priya was afraid of me, not because I was dangerous, but because she recognized something in me that she believed she did not have. And rather than doing the work of building herself up, she chose the easier path of tearing me down. That is not strength. That is the quietest kind of fear there is. And my record, the 6 years of work, of effort, of showing up honestly day after day, that record was never in danger. It was always there, solid, waiting. The lesson I carry with me now is this: build your truth so well that no lie can outlast it. Do your work with integrity. Keep your receipts, not out of paranoia, but out of self-respect. And when someone tries to define you through their fear, let your record speak louder than their story ever could. She called me dangerous. My record proved her right, and I never had to raise my voice once.